Winter 1941. Japanese pilots take to the skies over China, confident their Zero dominates the air, until a new American fighter appears, jaws painted in shark's teeth, diving faster and hitting harder than anything they expected. On paper, Japanese planners mocked the Curtiss P-40 Warhawk as heavy and slow, yet within hours, their bombers start falling from the sky. The war's first real test of tactics versus technology erupts in the clouds, an aircraft dismissed in Tokyo, suddenly rewriting survival itself at the front. How could an underdog like the P-40 flip the playbook? The answer caught everyone off guard and forced a reassessment that would shift the balance from intelligence rooms to the factory floor. Curtiss engineers, led by Don Berlin, began with the P-36 Hawk's airframe and made a bold decision. Swap the radial engine for the new Allison Fire V-1710 in line. This choice gave the P-40 its signature long nose and allowed for a more streamlined profile, but also meant living with a single-stage supercharger that limited power above 15,000 feet. The design team focused on durability and firepower, not just speed. The Warhawk's all-metal construction was heavier than most rivals, but that weight absorbed punishment and kept pilots alive. Early models carried two nose-mounted .50 caliber machine guns, but production quickly shifted to 6 wing-mounted Brownings, 3 in each wing, delivering a punch that outgunned most Japanese fighters of the time. The team prioritized fast assembly and rugged parts, accepting trade-offs in climb rate and agility. By late 1940, the P-40's blueprint reflected a philosophy: survive the first attack, hit hard, and use gravity as an ally. This set the stage for how it would be flown and feared when it finally reached the front. Late in 1941, Japanese Army intelligence officers circulated staff briefs on the American P-40. The language was blunt, heavy and sluggish. No match for the nimble Oscar or Zero. Reports filed from Hankow and Chungking described the Warhawk as a brute, fast only in a straight line, poor in a climb, and slow to turn. Analysts dismissed its value in a dogfight, predicting it would be easy prey for experienced Japanese pilots. In staff memos, technical diagrams highlighted the chin radiator as an obvious weak spot. There was open skepticism about the American approach: more armor, more guns, but at the cost of agility. Some war journals even joked about blocky American contraptions flooding the skies, but quietly noted the scale of US mass production. In officers' mess halls, the shark-mouthed nose art was the subject of jokes, not fear. The consensus was clear: the P-40 might be tough, but it was not expected to last long against Japan's best. On December 20, 1941, 10 Kawasaki Ki-48 bombers from the 21st Hikotai approached Kunming at 20,000 feet. Waiting above, pairs of American volunteer group P-40s, their noses painted with shark teeth, dropped out of the sun. The first attack came fast. Tex Hill and his wingman dove at full throttle, guns blazing, aiming for the lead bomber. The heavy American fighters slashed through the formation, firing concentrated bursts before pulling up and away. Bomber crews, trained to expect slow, cautious opponents, met a wall of .50 caliber fire and broke formation in panic. Chinese ground observers logged burning wreckage in the foothills north of the city. Out of 10 bombers, only 1 returned in flyable condition. On the airfield, AVG pilots counted spent cartridges and bullet holes in their own wings. Discipline held, no one lingered to dogfight, no one chased stragglers. The shock was immediate. Japanese diaries recorded confusion at the speed and violence of the attack, the suddenness of loss, and the strange, grinning faces on the American planes. Japanese pilots soon found their expectations upended. In diary entries from the winter of 1941, bomber crews described the P-40 as a heavy adversary, but one that could dive with a speed no Zero or Oscar dared to match. Reports from the 21st Hikotai noted that Warhawks, when pressed, simply nosed over and vanished into the clouds at over 400 miles per hour. Pursuing them meant risking structural failure or an uncontrollable overshoot. Pilots who attempted a chase often returned to base shaken, sometimes with damaged airframes. Survivors of head-on passes recounted the shock of facing 6.50 caliber guns, far more firepower than any Japanese fighter carried. One pilot wrote, The shark mouth appears, there is a flash, and then the sky is empty again. Only the holes in my wing remind me it was real. Maintenance crews marveled at P-40s limping home full of bullet holes, still flying. The aircraft's rugged construction, armored cockpit, and self-sealing tanks earned it a reputation for surviving damage that would have downed a lighter machine. For the first time, Japanese airmen began to treat the Warhawk not as a joke, but as a problem to be solved. Captured P-40s at Tachikawa Airfield revealed a pattern of vulnerabilities that Japanese technical officers documented in detail. Maintenance crews noted the Warhawk's high wing loading, a factor that made it slow to respond in tight turns and left it bleeding speed when forced into a horizontal fight. Above 15,000 feet, climb rate dropped sharply, traced to the Allison engine's single-stage supercharger. Technical diagrams circulated in squadron briefings highlighted the rearward blind spot created by the cockpit frame and radio mast, an opening for attacks from below and behind. Gunnery instructors emphasized the exposed chin radiator and oil cooler as prime targets. A single burst in the right spot could drain coolant and force a quick landing. Training films produced from these evaluations showed pilots the best angles for approach and escape, reinforcing a doctrine that prioritized patience and teamwork over reckless pursuit. In the hands of skilled attackers, the Warhawk's strengths could be neutralized one flaw at a time. Japanese newspapers in early 1942 ran headlines boasting of easy victories over American fighters, dismissing the Warhawk as a relic weighed down by armor and excess steel. Editorial cartoons mocked its shark mouth as a desperate attempt to frighten, not fight. Yet inside the air staff offices, a different picture took shape. On February 12, 1942, a staff circular landed on squadron desks. Pilots were now forbidden to follow P-40s in a dive. The language was blunt. Chasing a Warhawk downward meant risking both aircraft and crew. Internal briefings warned that the American fighter's speed and firepower in a dive had already cost too many lives. Instructors quietly revised tactics, urging patience and teamwork over bravado. While the public heard tales of American inferiority, pilots read bulletins that called for caution and respect. The contradiction grew sharper with each new loss. Propaganda chiefs kept up the bravado, but the men who actually faced the shark mouth in the sky knew better. The gap between what was printed and what was ordered became a silent measure of the Warhawk's real impact. Curtiss production lines in Buffalo ran day and night, turning out P-40s at a rate that often topped 300 per month. In the China, Burma, India theater, supply officers tracked each airframe by serial number, logging arrivals and losses in thick ledger books. When a Warhawk went down, a replacement could reach the front in as little as 3 weeks, sometimes flown in parts across oceans, then reassembled in dusty depots near Karachi or Kunming. Factory foremen sent telegrams confirming shipments, while field crews stripped usable parts from damaged planes to keep others flying. The numbers told their own story. For every P-40 lost in combat, another was already on its way. Japanese pilots, watching fresh Warhawks appear after each engagement, began to sense that American losses were not permanent setbacks, but brief interruptions in a relentless cycle. For many Japanese veterans, memories of the P-40 Warhawk lingered long after the war's end. In post-war memoirs, former pilots described the Warhawk not as the most dangerous enemy in the sky, but as the most unyielding. Squadron manuals revised in 1943 still reference the lessons learned over China and Burma. Avoid vertical pursuit, respect its firepower, and never underestimate its ability to survive damage. These instructions, once written in urgency, remained part of training doctrine for years. At aviation museums in Japan and abroad, the P-40 is often displayed with its iconic shark mouth, a symbol that once drew laughter but later commanded respect. Veteran accounts recall the Warhawk's persistence, how it returned to battle after each loss, how its pilots fought with discipline, refusing to be baited into disadvantage. In private conversations and public interviews, retired IJAAF airmen credited the P-40 with teaching them the value of energy tactics and the limits of overconfidence. The Warhawk's legacy, in their eyes, was not about fear, but about endurance and the hard lessons of adaptation. By war's end, over 13,700 P-40 Warhawks had rolled off Curtiss production lines, a number that far exceeded Japan's expectations and strained their ability to keep pace. Japanese pilots who once dismissed the Warhawk as heavy and clumsy learned, through hard combat, to respect its dive speed, firepower, and resilience. The P-40 may not have been the fastest or most advanced, but its persistence and the industrial power behind it changed the balance in the skies, reminding us that, in war, underestimation can be as decisive as any weapon.